Welcome into the GigEm247 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Brian Perroni. A happy new year to everybody. This is our first podcast of 2023. It was a busy weekend for Texas A&M, actually, both with some big news of a player returning and a new addition out of the transfer portal. We'll get into all that. Brian, happy new year. How's everything been?
Oh, it's everything's going well. I mean, this is our first podcast, I think, since the early signing period as well. So, so should be a little fun one with some good news. A&M signing all the guys. All the people that were committed signed. They didn't lose anybody, and picked up a couple additions in the days leading up to it, and on that day. So, yeah, man, we got good news for Aggie football, and like you said, a couple transfers coming in too.
Yeah, you mentioned David Hicks and Javon Thomas. Those were really probably the two we were watching the closest, with Oklahoma and Oregon coming after David Hicks. And as we've talked about, and he kind of talked about at the All-American game, Elijah Robinson, that presence that he had and the relationship those two had really made the difference down the stretch. And he mentioned, he had all the faith in the world and the coaching staff that they were going to be able to get this righted because of that relationship he has with Elijah Robinson. And TCU made a run at Javon Thomas. That one was certainly probably back and forth the last 48 hours before the early signing period. But A&M adds him and then adds Tony Grimes a little after the early signing period as well, North Carolina transfer. And then we get to this weekend and they add another former national top 50 prospect to the fold, and Sam McCall out of Florida State. What'd you make of that addition? He maintained a pretty low profile since being in the portal since early December, but a big deal for A&M to be able to add a guy like him. I think it adds another body to that defensive back room, gives some experience. Hasn't played, obviously, he played in a couple games last year, but just a guy that's now been on campus for a year, been in a weight room for a year, and continues to kind of rebuild that cornerback room.
Yeah, so, Tony Grimes is, what you're getting with him. He's a former five-star prospect, but he's now had 3 years on the field at North Carolina. So you see what you're getting with him. And they know McCall is more of a wild card because, like you said, he was a member of the 2022 class, top 50 kid, but didn't do a ton this year as a freshman. He moved between cornerback and safety. A&M likes him as a corner, but if he can live up to the ranking that he had coming out of high school, top 50 kid, he was ranked there for a reason, with the athleticism and his size. So yeah, I could see why A&M, liked him and went after him because, basically it's it's basically a high school commit. You're just, they're really judging based on his high school film and things like that, and they really liked him. And he played against Gabe Dindy in high school. They were at rival high schools, so got some familiarity with at least one guy on the roster. And you had said he kept a bit of a low profile. I think the portal is a lot like that. These kids in the portal aren't looking for all the attention like that. Well, I mean, some of them are. Like Travis Hunter got himself some either Instagram or YouTube followers or whatever it was. So, but most of these transfers, just like, I've done the recruiting process. Now I'm just looking to find a place. A lot of them put out top lists and offers of things, but McCall didn't even do that. Just sort of guessing at who was after him. And, I believe, TJ Rushing was one of the guys really involved there. And then James Coley, who recruits Florida, and, just did a good job of keeping A&M off the radar of other schools, and wasn't the school others were recruiting against for him. So, yeah, did a really good job. Tony Grimes has a year. He technically would have 2 years, but, he just wants to play a year and then possibly go pro, whereas McCall has, 2 or 3 years ahead that he's going to play at A&M. So, he's more of a long-term prospect.
No doubt. And when you couple him with Bravion Rogers and Javon Thomas now and Bobby Taylor as well, that kind of gives you a solid group to move into the future with Tony Grimes and Tyreek Chappelle. I'd still like to see them possibly add one more body to that room just in terms of depth. We saw how injuries kind of hit that room hard this past year. I think one more addition puts that group in a nice spot. And yeah, you mentioned, I think it's spot on with these transfers. It's tough sometimes because they've been through the recruiting process once. They've done all the interviews, they've done all the camps and all that sort of stuff. This time around, they're they're just looking to kind of work with their camp, find a spot or two that intrigues them, get on a visit and go and find a new spot. And, and you look at the rest of the transfer portal and what A&M needs to get done. Linebacker to me is still a big need. And, missing out on Mason Cobb was a pretty big blow. USC managed to get him on campus after A&M and land his commitment. And, there's still a ton of options out there. But for me, linebacker and wide receiver are probably the two biggest needs remaining, and they need bodies at both those positions.
Oh, no, for sure. I mean, A&M has offered more receivers than they have, guys at any other position. So, yeah, that's definitely a need. I mean, it helped to get, the Micah T's added in the class right before signing day. And I could see them still, going after, they got Jaquan Smith coming in town and Raymond Contrell's unsigned. So, you never know if they're, try and get the Georgia commit in town again. But they really need a guy that can come in and play immediately. Joshua Cobb's from Wyoming.
Yeah.
He's one that we haven't really talked about, but is one of the first guys A&M offered. He's from San Antonio. He had a huge weekend. I mean, he added like 10 more offers. Schools are really looking to see who's still available. So could be tough, going to be tough competition with him, but he's a guy to watch. I think he's the only or one of the only two wide receiver offers that A&M has put out that is not committed yet. Hold on, I'm looking at the list. Grant DeBose from Charlotte too, who's just got a year of eligibility, but Cobbs has 2 years, and and Isaac Tesla. I don't know how to say his name, but
I think it's Tesla. Yeah, but
Tesla.
When you look at these guys, I think one of the common threads is they're looking clearly for kind of and with the JUCO offer as well, looking for, it looks like kind of a big bodied receiver to go with Evan Stewart and Moose Muhammad. It seems like that's really the position that they've been targeting with the guys that they've offered. I feel like you mentioned with Micah T's in the fold, I think he probably fits best as a slot receiver, although he mentioned, A&M had mentioned using him in a couple different spots, but I think slot's probably the best spot for him. That position kind of seems to be in a good spot now with plenty of depth there, but really looking for that big receiver to go along with Noah Thomas and add to that part of the room. I think they've targeted that as the area that they can improve. And you mentioned there's still a ton of guys out there, and that's what makes it interesting. It was how hard will they push for Jaquan Smith down the stretch, and with having Micah T's in the fold, I think is one of the big question marks. And then switching gears to the other big news from the weekend, the return of Demani Richardson, I think is big news as well. Announced that on Sunday, and for me, it goes back to what we talked about with McKinley Jackson and Edgerrin Cooper. Demani Richardson's played a lot of football now, and he's been in this program a while. Gives you a veteran voice at all three levels of the defense now, and a guy who's really been through it. He's been through the highs and the lows, and is just we talked so much about youth last year and how many young players were playing in the secondary and all over the defense. To have a veteran voice like that and be able to hold guys accountable, I think it's a huge deal for A&M and honestly probably a smart move for him as well to put another strong year on the field and see if that can improve his draft stock.
No, for sure. I mean, Demani has, I think his draft, it's probably, the NFL knows what he is. I mean, he's had 4 years as a starter. You're not going to show much else, but he can definitely help this team. I mean, he had 2 huge plays, one against Arkansas, one against LSU this year. And I mean, just that. And then the leadership, looking at the scholarship distribution, Bryce Anderson is a freshman, but he's going to, he's the nickel. He's taking over for Antonio Johnson. Yeah. So then you say, who is there at safety? Jordan Gilbert, Jared Kerr, and Jacoby Matthews. Well, I mean, Jordan Gilbert has a little bit of experience, but those other guys, not really. So you need one of those senior veteran leaders. So it's big. And the team as a whole, I mean, we saw this year what could happen with the locker room if there weren't, wasn't some veteran leadership. So you got him, and, I think there's a good chance you end up seeing Aniyah Smith come back. So, if you can get him and Aniyah Smith to come back for their, super senior years, I think that's big in terms of production and just, a calming presence in the locker room.
No doubt. And you mentioned, to be able to have Jordan Gilbert and Demani Richardson and Jacoby Matthews, it just kind of shores up that aspect of the defense. Obviously, you have Tyreek Chappelle coming back as well to anchor one side of the deep. We talked about Tony Grimes and Sam McCall. You start to feel better about the way the secondary starting to look, with still some time to go and some young players coming in, Javon Thomas, Braven Rogers. We talked about Dalton Brooks, how he factors into the secondary room as well. You start to feel better about that, the way that room comes together as well.
No, for sure, for sure. I mean, it's not going to have as many bodies as there were this year. The safeties and the cornerbacks. With all the guys they lost, but you do have what was looking like it was going to be very, very, very thin. Only a couple of weeks ago. Looks looks a little better now, and especially with the incoming guys as well. So yeah, I mean, I think it's in good shape, and especially with those two transfers at cornerback. I mean, it's really just reloading and getting the depth, if nothing else. But Tony Grimes is expected to come in and vie for a starting job, and probably take Jalen Jones' job. So yeah, I mean, it's things look less dire now than they did. When everybody started jumping in the portal when there were 20 plus players. A&M has done a good job of replacing some of those guys. Linebackers, a different story. I mean, it was big keeping Edgerrin Cooper out of the portal. I mean, it sounds silly, but that's
a big win.
Win. It's a huge win to keep your guy. I mean, he had said, I'm entering. He put on Snapchat. I'm entering. LSU thought he was entering. I mean, he was all but gone to LSU, and they kept him around. So that's a huge win to keep him on the roster. So chalk that up to one, in the offseason, a recruiting victory that people won't be talking about.
No, we've talked about it before, but it's as much about recruiting your own guys to stay on the roster as it is getting guys out of the portal. And A&M's been able to do that, keeping guys in the fold like an Evan Stewart, like a Moose Muhammad, and Edgerrin Cooper. You keep some of those guys and you start to feel good about some of the guys you have returning, at least from a starting standpoint. I still think they need more depth across the room. And, there's not with the majority, with all the class signed except for Samu Time Manepepe, who's going to have a ceremony later this month. Kaden Jones,
he's signed too. If anybody's watching this, that's the secret.
Yeah,
he's signed too. But he's asked him to hold off until his birthday later this month, which is January 23rd, I believe.
Yeah,
21st. Yes, I know. Sorry, I knew it was one day off of my brother's, which was 22nd. So yeah, January 21st.
Yeah, and so got him in the fold, and the one of the big decisions remaining is that of Kaden Jones, who will announce this weekend, January 7th, at the All-American Bowl. I will be down there this week in San Antonio, so we'll certainly catch up with him and see where things stand. But A&M was able to get him on campus right before the early signing period for an official visit, and we've talked about this that Florida had the lead probably throughout the fall, but you had a chance to speak with him, and A&M gained a lot of ground on that visit right before the visit weekend. And it's kind of a real close race heading into the final week, as it has been with him throughout.
Yeah, he was definitely Florida heading into that visit. And, you saw that with the crystal balls coming in. They came in for a reason, but Florida's now worried. And I would lean towards it being A&M. Obviously, we'll have more of an idea from talking to him down, from you talking to him in the network, talking to him down at the All-American Bowl. But, I would probably give A&M the edge right now because that visit went so well. And, his mom's an Aggie. His uncle played for A&M, so that helps. And I really think he just liked hanging out with the signees and also just getting to know the players on the team. He really, had a lot to say about that. So A&M did a great job. And that's what we always talk about, the importance of getting the last visit. And that just showed it.
Got the last voice, got the last message. And he will sign in February, even though a lot of kids sometimes will sign in December and ask their school to hold it until January. He is waiting until February to sign. And so, if they're able to get him, I think it would really round out this class pretty nicely with Chase Basantes, TJ Shanahan, Colton Thomas, Ndaquil Betrand, and Kaden Jones. Gives you 3 tackle bodies that you can kind of roll with, and then 2 kind of nasty maulers in the interior, I think that's a pretty solid offensive line class, and especially adding at a position of need. So going to be fascinating to watch what happens there, and we will certainly be back to break it all down. As always, if you like these videos, be sure to share and subscribe on the GigEm247 Sports YouTube channel. If you follow us along on Spotify or iTunes, be sure to give us a 5-star review there as well. And to everyone, have a great start to the new year, and we'll certainly be back next week to break everything down and get you ready for the rest of the month of January. Take care, everybody.